And I'm going to go and pass the ball over to Rachel so she can begin presenting.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Rachel.
It'll take me just a moment here to get my screen ready to share. And Dana, you can hear me okay? Wendy, can we hear you?
I can
Hi,
hear
everyone.
you.
Wendy.
Oh, Wendy, you sounded a bit muffled, but I can hear you fine, Rachel.
Okay, we'll give Wendy just a moment here. What I'm going to do while we're waiting is we have a sample form that we use for our exercises today. So I'll go ahead and post that link again in the chat window. If you would like to receive the emails that we'll be sending out, first the kind of original email as we set up the form, and then the second email as we modify it, go ahead and fill your information in on this test form. We'll delete it once we're finished. We won't sell your email or your personal information to anyone. This is just for the purpose of today. And let's see, Wendy, are we able to hear you now?
Hi, are we hearing me a little bit better, everybody?
Beautiful.
Yes, that's great. Thanks, Wendy.
Wonderful.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. The first thing we have on our agenda today is our introductions. And so I'll let Wendy start. I'm going to go ahead and click into our agenda slide as we're going. But when Dana shares these slides with everyone, our contact information is on the title screen here.
Great. Well, hi, everyone. I'm Wendy Gorton. I'm a Google certified teacher, a Google Apps EDU certified trainer, and I've worked with Google Workshop for educators and Google Workshop for administrators around the world. And I'm really excited today to be with Rachel to share a little bit about Google Apps Script and how nice it is to be able to start to learn a language that can take all of the great apps that we use every day and try to make them do a little bit more for us. Because one of my favorite quotes from Google's product manager for Google Apps Script is "Don't hate, automate." And so taking kind of Google's stance on trying to make all the mundane things that we do with some of our apps like Spreadsheets, forms, and the like, and making it work for us a little bit easier. So I'm super excited to be here today. I will be running your back channel, so if you have any questions in the all attendees chat box, I'm happy to kind of prompt you there for any questions or bring that up into discussion with Rachel and I on the webinar.
Okay, and hello everyone. I'm Rachel Wente-Chaney, and I'm on the phone from Central Oregon. I am the Chief Information Officer for the High Desert Education Service District. We support our regional school districts in the areas of things like technology, special education, legal services, human resources, and I am excited to be a Google Apps certified trainer, and I'm even more excited to be here with Dana and Wendy today. We had a great part 1 of our JavaScript for Teachers session. I think we kind of tongue-in-cheek started out with Physics for Poets. This is a very basic, very non-computer programmer introduction to JavaScript and into some specific Google Apps script modifications that we can make. So for today, we are going to start off with a review. For those teachers in the crowd, you know, the best way to really kind of continue our learning is to make sure that we step back first and talk about what we learned in part 1. As part of that review, we're going to look back at the simple mail merge script that we used. We're going to take just a minute or two to explain JavaScript objects. We glanced over them in our first session, and they're really at the core of what we're doing today with being able to pull data ranges and data from specific ranges in our spreadsheets and specific sheets in our spreadsheet book. And then we're actually going to get into our examples and kind of our real browser experience where we're setting up a simple mail merge. We're sending emails based on the default simple mail merge script, and then we'll go in and modify that script. And then we have our last slide, which is the extras, some links to some extra help. So, just like in part 1, you will not leave this session able to write your own script. Today we're looking at modifying an existing script. If you're someone who's already writing Google Apps scripts on a regular basis, you're welcome to join along with us, but this is going to be a little under your level. For those of us who get a little nervous when we see those lines with curly brackets and dollar signs, this is right where you want to be. In session 3, in part 3 of our series, we will work on writing a script from scratch, a very simple script from scratch. Okay, so let's get going. I have posted a couple of times now the link to our introduction form in the chat window, and maybe Wendy can find that and repaste it for those who have joined in the last few minutes. If you would like to receive the email that we are sending out today as we're working on this script, go ahead and fill out the form. Okay, so the review of our first session. It was an overview of just really basic JavaScript fundamentals. JavaScript is the language that's used in Google Apps scripts. Google Apps scripts has a little bit of its own customized flair in there, but it's really, JavaScript is the language that's built on. It's a very flexible language, one that's readable by humans. In our Part 1 example, we looked at some code as it evolved from just bits, zeros and ones, all the way through JavaScript, and the difference, still getting the same results because we were running the same calculation, but the difference in our ability to read it as human beings using a human readable language like JavaScript. We talked about functions, and functions are small pieces of a piece of computer code or a program that do something useful. And the nice thing about functions is that you define them, you give them a name, and you say what they do. And then when you need to use them, so let's say maybe multiple times through thousands of lines of a computer program, you can just call that function by its name rather than having to type out the 3 lines to 300 lines that function actually does. So they're kind of a placeholder, kind of a call to. And for today, the important thing is that we have a function called send email, and that's the backbone of our simple mail merge script. We also talked about values, and values are as they sound. They can be numbers or strings, which is text. They can be booleans, which is a value, true or false. They can be objects, or they can be functions. Last time, we went into a little more depth on each of those with the exception of objects because we wanted to hold objects out for today. So we're circling back to that. We talked about variables, and that I imagine we have some teachers in the audience. Variables are kind of what we think of when we think of algebra. They definitely represent a value. But what's a little different in JavaScript and where our octopus comes from, he was blue in our first part of this series, and he's purple for part 2. In JavaScript, variables, they actually catch and hold values. They can be changed. They do still need to have a name, but it's more like an octopus reaching out and grabbing values as needed and then releasing when not needed. So they're not the boxes that we typically think of in some computer languages and certainly in mathematics, where we have a variable that represents a place for that value and it's fairly fixed. In JavaScript, they're much more flexible. And then I just wanted to circle back again on Booleans. It really is a true or false value. We're trying to get to a yes or a no, a true or a false, an on or an off. And they often involve and, or, not, and then operators like greater than, less than. Okay, so last time in part 1, we started with this simple mail merge script. And in part 1, we really took our time talking about JavaScript as a language and talking about some of the basics of Google Apps scripts. We actually went through the process of setting up this simple mail merge script. We started by making a copy of the spreadsheet and editing our form. And then we really just ran the script as it was, packaged. We didn't make any changes. In fact, I was really annoyed because I didn't change the typo that's in the sample template, and we'll get to that on another slide. But for that part, we actually really just wanted to take what was already there and run through it step by step. This time, we're going to go a little deeper, and we're actually going to change the data we're collecting and then the email that's sent out on that data. So, to run through the steps of what we did before, we'll walk through this once we flip into the live browser. There is a simple mail merge template, and the way that we get to the actual tools to be able to use it is we need to make a copy. The template won't allow you to do much, so we make a copy of our own. And when you make that copy, you'll notice that you get your full menu. So you have your editing tools and the extra items on the toolbars you need to run the script. Once we have edited the form to our liking and we've actually sent it out to people, we can run the script to do the mail merge and send the emails. And we have a walkthrough of how you do that on this slide, where you open the script editor and we click on, in this case, there's only the one script in the menu on the left. We run that function, that send email function. And you'll get a couple of warnings saying that the script needs to access your account to be able to do so. And then we click the run, we checked our email, and last time we had several folks who were following along with us, and they were able to do this in the same time that we did, and it worked beautifully. So, at this point, what I want to do is take a quick break. We've kind of caught you up with what we did last time. And I want to take this little intermission to talk about JavaScript objects. This is not a Bloom's taxonomy. You need to be at the top of the pyramid right now. We're at the understanding level, down at the bottom. A JavaScript object, remember we had it in our list of values, similar to numbers and text and data, essentially. But it's a special kind of data in that it includes, it can have data on its data. So it can include properties and methods. Properties are things that describe the data or the object, and methods are actions or things that are done. So at the W3 Schools tutorial site, which is a great resource, I think I have it on the last slide, they use an example as a person for an object. So a person can have properties, a name, a height, weight, age, eye color, things that identify that object. And then that person also can do things, can eat, sleep, work, or play. And for today, this is important because as we look at scripts like mail merge scripts, we need to be able to chunk some things together. So we need to be able to chunk some specific types of data and give them properties. And then we need to be able to actually have actions related to those objects and properties. And we'll see that just a little bit as we get into the mail merge script here. So before we jump into modifying, Wendy, is there anything you'd like to add at this point? Or are there some questions that we can answer now?
I think so far our audience has checked out what you did. I've gone ahead and linked the YouTube of our first webinar. If what we just glossed over you're interested in finding out a little bit more about, that's an hour long. It's kind of going in depth to what Rachel just described. So feel free to go back into that. And so far we have a physics teacher out in the audience and really interested in doing some functions with forms and scripts. So hopefully as we get into the body of a script later, we can touch on kind of a common request that teachers have. How do I take information that my teachers fill out on a form and use that for scheduling in a shared calendar or other kind of functions in that way? So that's what we've got so far.
Perfect. So today we're not going to quite get to the depth that teacher probably would like, but I liked it when Wendy said looking for those, kind of time slot and event scheduling things. That's actually the example we'll use on a very simple level, again, because we know we only have 45 minutes or so today, and we want to make these digestible chunks. So let's jump in. On modifying a script, we're going to, once we leave our slides, we're going to go to our live form, and we're going to run through sending emails with the data we have, and we'll make sure that folks are receiving those emails. And then we're going to go in and modify, and we're going to add a field to the data we're collecting. We're going to give you an opportunity to resubmit on the form. We may even create a new form. And then we're going to run again and see how we add that extra data into our email that's sent out. So to do that, when you have your simple mail merge spreadsheet set up, we need to first edit the existing forms because we need to ask another question. We need to collect another piece of data. When we add the question to the form, I imagine we have some forms experts in the audience. You'll notice that just like on a traditional form, you'll have a new column or columns that have been added to the spreadsheet. Once we've verified that our new placeholder for our data is there, we can actually go to the second tab in the book, in the spreadsheet book. So we click on that second tab at the bottom of the document, which is the email template. And we're actually going to use just natural language. We're going to type in the words or the sentence or the text that we would like around this piece of data. And then we're going to insert a template marker for that data. And the important thing is, Wendy, why don't we see if, I imagine that there are people in the audience today who have done mail merges in Microsoft. And you'll know that when you are doing a mail merge in, let's say, a Microsoft Word document, for those of us who used to use Word years ago, that you had to have the correct headers from your spreadsheet file or your Excel file in your mail merge. This is very similar. So we have to make sure that our column name matches correctly in both the email template and the spreadsheet itself. Once we do that, we need to increase our data range. Again, kind of thinking about those objects, those chunks of data. We need to say that we're going to pull data from more than just the 3 or 4 columns that we have on the original example. And to do that, we're actually going to get a chance to peek at the script editor and making a change in that, saving it, and then rerunning that send email function. Okay, so I think at the end we'll come back and talk about some of these examples. A few of these are carryovers from part 1, and Wendy has some good stories about the forums and things like that, but let's go ahead and move to our live environment first. So this is the spreadsheet that backs up the form that we've been linking in the chat window. And you'll notice I did shorten the email address column so that our addresses wouldn't be sitting out for the world to see once this is on YouTube. And one of the first things that I want to do is open up my script editor, and let's give this a try just to see that our simple mail merge is there. It is. And the way that happened automatically, which is what it looks like here, is it wasn't really automatically. I actually used the template simple mail merge spreadsheet. So this script was already built into the spreadsheet. It looks like a normal spreadsheet, but it's not. And again, if you want to go back and watch part 1, the step-by-step is there on how we got to this point. So you'll see that my only script sitting here in the menu on the left is simple mail merge. And what I want to do is select my function, send emails. And this little button here is our run button. And when I click run, you'll see I haven't run this one yet, so I get these warnings. And let's go ahead and say that's okay. And I get an alert box saying that I can now run the script, which means I have to do just that. That first time, I actually stopped the process because I had to authorize the script. So I do need to go back in and run it a second time. And you'll see I get my alert box saying that it was running. And let's give this just a minute for those of you who have access to your email. If you could please check your email and see if you received one that looks like this. Hi, your first name. Thanks you, which was my big annoying piece last time. Thanks you for signing up. You submitted the following data. First name, last name, email address. Please verify the information and contact us if there's any mistake. Thank you. So if you did receive that, okay, if you could chat that out for Wendy, that'd be great.
Yep, we're getting some people saying they've got it.
Okay, great. So you'll notice, again, if you are wondering how I got to this email template part, watch my cursor down here at the bottom. We have two tabs, two sheets in our spreadsheet. The first is for our data and our form responses, and the second is for the email template. So if we want to change this up a little bit, what I am going to do first of all is I am going to go ahead and delete the data that's sitting in here. And we're going to start with a clean slate. Our test went through correctly. And now what I want to do is, for those who are familiar with forms, I'm just going to go into my live form, or actually to my form editor. I'm going to edit form, which is under the form menu item. And you'll see when you hit the form, you should have seen a welcome message like this, and then a box for your first name, last name, and email address. So let's use the example of trying to schedule some conferences. And again, this is not going to be the full loop on actually having these things scheduled for you and put on your calendar. We may use that as our example in part 3, Wendy. What we're going to do, though, is give people a request option for requesting conference time slots. So I am going to add an item. Let's do choose from a list. First priority. And let's say we have an 8 a.m. We have a 9 o'clock a.m. and a 10 o'clock a.m. And let's say first preference. Okay, you could add more time slots, obviously. For this example, let's just keep it simple. And I'm going to go ahead and make this a required question. And click Done. And then Save. So now when we, first of all, let's look at our form again to make sure. And I can just click the link at the bottom of the form window. And you'll see that I can enter my name. And then I can say I'd like the 10 a.m. slot and submit. And here we go. For those, there are two people who it looks like you may have filled out the form right before I hit save, so you may want to go back a second time. Because those are empty values there, I'm going to keep deleting. And that way everyone will see this example as it works. So you notice, please select your conference time slot first preference. For today, we're going to leave that just as it is. We can certainly shorten that up. We could say conference time. In fact, I'm changing my mind as we're doing this. Maybe we'll go ahead and we'll say conference time to make our lives easier. Okay, and everyone's filling in quickly. So check mark on the first row that yes, we have our new row, or our new column with our new piece of data we're collecting. And now what we want to do is actually reference that data in our email template. So again, we click on that second tab at the bottom of the window. Now different browsers have some different ways of accessing this cell A1, which is our email template. So I'm on an Apple and I'm in the Chrome browser, and for me I can just double click in the cell, and that first thing that annoys the heck out of me is this little thanks you. So I'm going to go ahead and put my cursor right there by the S. I can just delete it. That's one of the easiest ways to modify this script, and we didn't really have to do anything. So now, though, we want to modify to actually add our other data element. And so you'll see it says hi, and then this $sign stands for the string, so text data, or a template marker with the curly brackets, and it's looking for first name. And again, if we bump back over to our column, we'll see the column name was first name. Thank you for signing up. You submitted the following data, and again, the text, and then the actual template marker next to it. So let's add our conference timeline. And on an Apple and Chrome, if you use the Alt or Option key, and then hit Enter or Return, you get a line return in that cell block. If you don't, if you just try to hit Enter or Return, you actually return to the next row. So, Alt Option. Wendy, do you use Apple, or do you have a PC? Do you know what the keystroke combination is for a non-Apple computer?
I've definitely done most of my scripting on my Mac, but I know that I've run them pretty well in a PC environment, but I've never modified one, so I'm not sure if it's similar or not. Maybe Dana can attest.
Okay, or maybe someone in the chat window, if it's a Shift return or if it's a Control return. So
I think it's a Control or Alt return. I can't remember though, but
okay. So you might have to try a little bit if you're on a Windows.
And then Shift might be in there too.
Yeah.
It's either Control return, Alt return, Control Enter, looks like.
Okay, perfect. So you can either experiment or you can Google it. And I'm sure there's a little page out there on what keystroke you use to get a line return in a spreadsheet cell. So that was a long, rambling little diversion on how to get a line return. So let's return to modifying our script. We have our first name, last name, email address. You requested and you'll see that I'm just typing text. I'm typing what I want the email to say. So you requested but here's where I want to enter that data from the conference time column on my spreadsheet. And you'll notice we're not going to get really deep into the syntax or the why this construct is this way. We're just going to copy it in this example because we're learning by doing and learning from other examples. So we have the $sign, a curly bracket, quotation mark, and I believe, this is where I'm testing my memory, I shortened it to conference time. Apparently my short-term memory is not what it was. So you requested and it's going to pull that time that you requested from that list. Conference slot. Please verify the information and contact us if there's any mistake. Let's go ahead and make this a little more personal. Please verify the time requested. Let me know of any schedule changes. Okay, and now we're going to click out of our cell, the changes held. So the last piece is, when we look at our form responses, you'll notice when we started this, we had 4 columns. And in our script, we have a part of our program that actually wants to look for those 4 columns, and we want to increase that. So let's go into our script editor again, And you'll notice here right at the very top of the simple mail merge, here's the 4 that we're looking to change. And again, we could spend an hour, we could spend a semester talking about the get max rows and the data sheets and the objects and the variables. For today, we're trying to do this basic work through with having you see it in person and then leaving you the links to deepen your knowledge on a lot of the why and a lot of how each of those individual elements work together. So for today, we need to increase our 4 here to a 5 for our range. And then we're going to click Save. And then let's cross our fingers. If I go to Send Emails again, and this time I shouldn't get the warnings because I've run this script before, and I click Run, it tells me it's sending the emails. And now let's all check our inbox. And again, cross your fingers, make sure we didn't make a mistake. And hopefully you've received an email that looks a lot like the first one, that has our information, first name, last name, email address, and then another line saying the time slot that you selected on that form. And if folks can shout out in the chat box, that would be great. I received mine, so I'm breathing and uncrossing my fingers so I can type.
Some of our other attendees received it.
So that's as simple as it is. We edit the form. We can add multiple pieces of data that we want to collect. If I'm thinking classroom, I'm thinking when a student takes an online assessment, when I've set up a Google form for a quiz, and I want them to be able to maybe, rather than having to give access for my students to go back in the form, maybe one of the quick and easy ways that I can get them some immediate feedback is actually doing a send emails function, a simple mail merge, where they actually receive the selections they made in the quiz right back in an email. After everyone's taken the quiz, I can run that function. Wendy, I think, do you have some other examples of some things that you might collect in your form that can then be shared back out in an email with the people you're collecting it from?
Yeah, I think teacher observations is a good one. If you ever an administrator using a form and going and doing walkthroughs in your classroom, it's a nice way to send back immediate feedback. So I know that's a popular use of a mail merge. And there's also some really cool ones of sending, directions that you can do for, other kind of events that you might be planning with parent population or at your school. So once you start thinking, there's just a ton of different applications, even with this just one function. So pretty exciting.
It is. And fairly simple. Again, this is a baby step version. This is physics for poets. This is JavaScript for teachers. We're not going to ramble on for an hour on all of the objects and all of the complexities of JavaScript and Google Apps script. We really wanted to show you this simple example of how to modify an existing script. And I want to review it one last time, the steps that we just went through. We edited our form. We added a question for another piece of data that we wanted to collect. We checked to make sure that it populated in our spreadsheet. And doing that's not enough. We actually have to go to our email template. And in our email template, call that data. We have to pull in that conference time. So we modified the email template. And then the last step that we needed to do was we actually needed to go in and edit the simple mail merge script to look for that extra field, to look for that extra column. and then we run it, and we cross our fingers. I am a big believer in filling out my forms once I first create them with the 3 or 4 email addresses that I use, and then giving a quick run just to myself before I send it live in the wild. It's probably just maybe best practice, or maybe it's just that I'm accident prone. Okay, so with that, let's return back to our slideshow. And
if anyone did have any questions about that process of modifying, please feel free to put it in the box, and I can send any other tutorials or links your way to dig back in later.
And we'd also love to hear if this is making sense. If it looks like something you could, once we log off this call, if you could open up a mail merge script and get in there and edit it yourself. Okay, so while you're typing in the chat box, the last slide on the presentation, and I believe Dana will be sharing the link to this presentation. It's public, and then she's also recording this webinar, so there'll be a YouTube posting of the walkthrough. On this last slide, there are some links. There are a few at the top here that carried over from last time and a couple at the bottom. Eloquent JavaScript is a really nice introduction to the language JavaScript. Code Academy is a fun website where you start learning JavaScript from the moment you hit the site. It has you typing in strings and returning messages back and prompts and alerts back. Google Apps Script Tutorials is a great kind of overview of Google Apps Script and some really basic tutorials to get you started.
I highly recommend that. I'm a big self-learner, so oftentimes those Google Apps Script tutorials are just nice because it's very step-by-step. It kind of takes you through the code line by line and gives you an example one to play with, and very foolproof. So I definitely would give that a go if this is of any interest of you to actually use. I would definitely try out the tutorial.
Okay, and then we also have the link to the templates and to the actual simple mail merge script that we used today. And again, there are directions on how to do this everywhere. You can just Google it, or Dana has shared in the chat window some of the resources from part 1 of our series. For today, again, we touched on JavaScript Objects. There is a nice tutorial on reading spreadsheet data using JavaScript Objects. And then I know that Wendy is a big Google Apps forums user, and I think one of my best pieces of advice is, as you're thinking of doing some scripting and doing some modifying of scripts for your use in the classroom, one of my best pieces of advice is become really good friends with a computer programmer. And it might take some extra coffee and some extra chocolate, but it's really that's a good person to have in your life.
For sure. The programmers out there, especially on the Google Apps forums, or any forum user in general, are just always so responsive. I had a specific request, kind of like Michael, our physics teacher who's out there. As teachers, we have very specific requests sometimes that we want to be able to do with our tools. And so I kind of threw my idea out there, what I wanted the script to do with a certain tool, and I got a response back within a day of a couple of ideas to tweak the script, and lo and behold, it worked. So definitely, try the tutorials, and then when it's not working exactly the way you want it to, pop in the forum and definitely shoot your ideas out, and you'll get a response back.
Okay, and then the last one is Flubaroo. And I know Michael and several others on the call and in my office, we're starting to play with some more advanced scripts where, again, for the purpose of today and for this series, we're looking at some really basic scripts. So in this case, it's great for your parents and your students for them to receive this email kind of verifying what they have submitted on your form. And like Wendy said, there are some neat additions in some of those tutorials and in some of the resources on the forums. You can do some things like adding interactive maps and maps from door to door for functions and events. But that next layer is really, and it's something that's very popular and very needed around here, are some of those scripts that actually allow you to do some scheduling, not just an email back, but actually create a calendar event and then block that calendar time as busy when the next person comes to try and schedule something. And for most of us who have 40-hour plus jobs as teachers and educators and school district employees, we're probably not going to sit and build those from scratch, and there are some great ones out there in the script templates, and even I think in the apps marketplace, there are several scripts that are packaged as programs. Many of them are free. And Flubaroo is one example of that, and it is pretty awesome. We have a lot of teachers in our schools in this area using it, and they giggle. And they don't giggle very often at this point, but they giggle when they see how easy it is.
Along the same lines of Flubaroo, I'm going to share in the chat box right now a link to another popular one for teachers, which is a Google Sites upload script, so that you can have students upload assignments to your Google site that you might be using for a classroom, website, school, district, whatever it might be. So that's a really popular one with the teachers that I work with as well, and I encourage you to check it out. And again, even just playing with a script, whether or not you might use it, it just gives you that practice of thinking like a coder and starting to recognize all of those variables and functions like second nature, which it does start to get to you the more code that you look at. I'm sure Rachel can talk about too.
It's like a puzzle.
Exactly.
Okay, so Wendy, that's all I have for today, and Dana, and I haven't looked at the Q&A box yet.
Not too many questions that we haven't already answered. Just a lot of praise about the Flubaroo and the resources that you guys have been sharing. Somebody did ask, and I provided some information in the Q&A box about doing mail merge from Spreadsheets to a document. And this year at IA, we actually announced the Google Documents service and objects that you can do. So I'll send out the link to the Q&A transcript, and you'll actually see those links to a presentation that they did that shows which objects you would use in a document. So in the same way that you can replace write an email in that same type of format that Rachel and Wendy showed with dollar signs and filling in the different fields, you'd be able to do that in a document as well by saying, replace this word using this word from a form. So it's pretty much very similar to what you're already doing here with this mail merge. It's just that you change the type. Instead of it being an email, you actually are modifying a document object. So those resources are also available.
Nice. And I see there was a question. There are triggers. Again, this is a pretty basic example, but there are some triggers and some automated processes in scripts that allow you, you watched me manually run the function send emails, and there are ways that you do not have to do that manually yourself each time. And maybe we'll touch on that. Maybe we'll have to extend this 3-part series into maybe like a 5-part series.
I think it's a great idea. It's great to always learn more about these different automations, and maybe we can have a working session for one of them. So thank you so much, Rachel and Wendy, and everybody. I will share the slide presentation that has all of these great links in here, as well as the Q&A transcript for some of those additional links that we shared over the chat and in the Q&A box. Again, this webinar was recorded, and you'll get a link to that as well.